What we talked about was those worldview questions. Where are we? Who are we? What the problem is? What's the solution? So keeping those in mind, then we can jump into the story at certain points as the story has progressed and kind of know where it's at and then where it's going. So that's, I think, a way that this is going to help us. We want to understand where Scripture is going. We want to understand how it relates to Jesus. We want to understand what the story is that God is telling. I think Josh mentioned one of the first or second weeks. This is a story that unfolds over time. So today is kind of, okay, how does the story actually unfold? So that's what we're going to look at. And hopefully we'll be able to look at lots of different verses too. That will be the goal, but this is kind of the rough format, and if you notice, it doesn't actually get into the New Testament at all. So that could be a whole entire different class. But if we could do this in, say, 45 minutes, then we could spend the next half hour talking about how these themes get picked up in the New Testament. Because there is a little bit of what's that?
You're going to do this in
45 minutes, yes.
All right.
Time it.
Is on.
Okay, I mean, really, we could go, obviously you can go really deep into all of this stuff, but that won't be our point today. So we're painting with a broad brush. We're doing a sight from 35,000 feet, looking down over the course of the Bible, and I think Tony mentioned last week, we're talking about a significant chunk of history. This is roughly, creation, whenever that was, to Jesus. That could be a very significant, long time, or it could be roughly 4,000 or 5,000 years or whatever. So, okay, so creation. So what we want to look at is basically the original intent, original design, not necessarily what he did in certain days, but what is his purpose for mankind, and then the fall. What's the situation that man got himself into, and what are the consequences of that, of those decisions that they made. Okay, so how would we summarize the creation account? God created man, and he tasked him with what?
Naming all the animals, male and female.
Okay. So he names the animals. Interesting thing is, I was reading this week in 1 Kings, and it's talking about how great Solomon is. And one of the things that it mentions is that Solomon is very wise and he knows all the animals. He can talk for days and days and days about the fish and about the beasts of the field. So you have this connection between Solomon and Adam, which is kind of unique and interesting. We might get into that a little bit, we might not. Okay, so he tasks him with naming the animals. What else?
Tending a garden.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Where would that be exactly?
Verse 28, chapter 1.
Okay, so fill the earth and subdue it. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. I'm thinking of, there's a couple different words he uses with working. Okay, put him in 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Okay, so Adam is tasked with working and keeping. Okay, work and keep. Okay, Mark, you mentioned 128. So the fruitfulness here. Fruitful, multiply, fill, and subdue. And which we take to mean what? What are the activities involved with being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth?
Having children.
Okay, having children.
Taking dominion over the earth.
Okay. Getting the earth and the things of the earth to do what you want them to do in a way. A responsibility thing.
So how big was the garden?
I don't know.
40 by 40.
It was the land. Between the rivers,
Well,
right?
what is-
Isn't that how it describes it?
Okay.
Between the
Because when we
Euphrates and
say subdue the earth, it really was in his knowledge at that time was only whatever was in the garden.
yeah.
And it was pre-flood, so.
Well, even the word earth is said land.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have this weird thing going on. You have a garden. There's implication that the garden is not the whole entire planet. That is a specific place on the planet, and that's what he's tasked with overseeing in a way. But the filling is expanding out beyond those borders. So some would see that there's in the design, in the original design of creation, that there's the intent that that garden would spread out and eventually cover as they go about fulfilling their responsibilities, multiplying, filling, and producing, and those types of things. Okay, so is that good? You want to add more to it? Do you want to say something about those things?
No, I think the meaning of fruitful, multiply, and fill and subdue, I think is, if from the surface reading of Genesis without the rest of the Bible, I think that would be exactly where you would go.
Okay. Do you want to add some?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. Okay, so we're keeping those in mind then. Okay, God gives them the plants to eat. Everything is good. There's a good tree in the garden. Lots of trees in the garden. There's a tree of life in the garden. And then there's a tree that they're not supposed to touch or eat. Not supposed to eat from, right? Okay, trees are important. They come up in the Bible all over the place. Okay, so the fall.
There's gold in the garden. Did you know that? I didn't realize that.
Gold?
Yeah.
Is that the gold in the,
In the river there, of the ice on, the wind winds through the land, there's gold. Also there.
okay, where's that at, George?
That is in 2.
Oh, yeah, okay.
10.
Yeah.
10 through 11.
Okay, a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden. Okay, so that's confusing as, okay, the river flows out of Eden to water the garden. I thought Eden was the garden. That's the Garden of Eden. Okay, we're going to leave that there. It divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and where there is gold.
Yeah.
And the gold of that land is good. There's
Yeah,
bad gold in
exception
different
made here.
lands, but okay. So bdellium and onyx stone are there. Where do those materials come up again in the story?
In the temple.
In the temple. Yeah. Yeah. So those words "work" and "keep" are the same words that are used to describe the activities of the priests in the temple. And another key feature of the temple is obviously the presence of God, which is God was in the garden. So there's someone who would say that the Garden of Eden is a prototypical temple.
Sure.
It has all those different components to it.
No, there's the ornate carvings within the temple offer pomegranates and
Yeah.
and
Yeah, things that harken back
Yeah.
to the garden, the fruitfulness of the garden. So all of a sudden, I mean, just since talking about that for 5-10 minutes, whatever. I mean, you see how rich this description is, and you see your mind is making connections to things that are coming later on in the story. And obviously you can't read Genesis 1, 2 without thinking about Revelation 21 and 22, which probably alludes to this numerous times, along with other parts of the Bible. So in a way we know.
So then I'll take the opportunity, because where it talks about, for instance, to be fruitful.
Okay.
I mean, it starts in Genesis 1, and Genesis 2, but as we move through the scriptures, we come to realize that our ability to be fruitful is totally, completely, utterly removed from us as a consequence of the fall.
Okay.
And it's not, we're not now talking about just bearing children. We're talking about being fruitful unto God. So the very commands that are given in the garden to Adam, the only way that those ultimately can be fulfilled are in Christ.
Okay, so that's a big
I'm
thematic jump.
I'm
Yeah.
making a significant jump.
Yeah.
I'm making a significant jump, but I'm filling in all the coming back from the greater light of the New Testament to look
Yeah.
back into the shadows, the lesser light
Yeah.
of the early chapters.
Yeah. And you do see the themes of fruitfulness and multiplying that
Absolutely.
picked up even as in the story of Israel
By the
at
prophets,
significant points.
through the prophets, talking about a more fruitful time as well as their own. All the way
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. Okay. The fall. So what do we see happening in the fall? I mentioned the curse and the promise. Okay, what was the word of the Lord to them if they would eat of the tree?
They would surely die.
When would they die?
And the day that they eat
The
of
day
it.
they eat of it. Okay. Okay, so that happens. They die. They are hiding from the Lord. They heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Okay, the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." Okay, so interesting here is the first question, where are you? Second question, who told you that you were naked? He doesn't mention the fear. Why are you afraid? He jumps right to the nakedness. Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? Well, yeah, obviously. Here's your opportunity, Adam. Take responsibility. No, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree and I ate. The Lord said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." So all of a sudden there's this fracture in God's creation. His good world, whether or not we want to call it a perfect world, is left up to debate, but it is a very good world. And the relationship has been severed. The relationship between Adam and Eve has been severed. They now see each other as those who would accuse, those who would be the ones who influence them to make these wrong decisions. And the relationship between God has been broken. So we can say, without a doubt, that they did die at that moment in the spiritual sense in which the Bible speaks of death, being this separation, this animosity between God and man. So that's what happens. And then the Lord pronounces his judgment. So he curses the serpent. Whatever's really going on there, I don't know. I mean, serpent, obviously we're thinking this is Satan, from allusions back to it in other scriptures. It doesn't say that in Genesis, it just says serpent. He's cursed, or the serpent is cursed. And then 15, so I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. Okay, so there's this enmity. Let's see, death upon eating. separation of relationships. Okay, so the serpent. Oops. Enmity between serpent and the woman and her offspring, or does it just say her offspring? Between you and the woman. Okay. Okay. And then it's the singular third person pronoun he, right? He shall bruise. So the offspring, whatever the offspring is, meaning possibly mankind in general, but then the focus gets narrowed down to this, who this offspring is. So offspring could be a singular or a plural idea, but the how he expands on that when he describes what this enmity is going to produce or result in. Okay, so we have this person, the offspring of the woman, the seed of the woman, is going to, in between, so he will crush the serpent's head. And the serpent will bruise the offspring.
Strike the heel.
Is that what it says, bruise, or
That's
strike
mine
the heel?
Different translation.
Okay. Okay. Ta-da! With the focus in Genesis on offspring, how do we see this carried out?
I think most of us were raised in the church, and we are in the church, and usually we just glance at that and say it's Jesus and move on.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, and what would we say? Okay, the bruising of the offspring is what?
The crucifixion.
Okay, so the serpent crucified Jesus, and then the crushing of the serpent's head is what? Resurrection. Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay.
What do you think was in Adam and Eve's mind when he was talking?
No clue.
That's a good question.
No idea.
Yeah.
Probably like scared out of the head, with no idea what he's talking about. Are we just gonna die?
But from then on, they would have waited for that promised one. And they would have put it in terms of what they understood as being, a hero figure of a kind. So you would have had to be, a warrior of some sort. And that's where the Messiah picture started to shape.
I think so, yeah. I think the emphasis upon is, you see these lineages really expanded on in the first 10 chapters, 11 chapters. And there is this, the line that flows from Adam and Eve, of course they have Cain and Abel. You have an older son or an older brother, a younger brother. And immediately you see enmity, not necessarily with the serpent and the offspring, but between the offsprings themselves, between these two seeds. And of course, Abel is brutally murdered by his brother. Cain fails just like his father failed to resist that temptation. The sin is crouching at the door. And then, of course, she has Adam knew his wife, and she had another son, Seth, right? So Seth comes, and then his line is a little different, because it's then when people start calling upon the name of the Lord. It's that line that kind of gets traced through that's almost an animosity towards the other line, or the other lines in the story. So I'm not sure exactly how it all plays out in detail, but the weird thing is that you don't really see this verse being referred to anywhere else in the Bible, at least explicitly. Of course, there's probably allusions to it. But you do see, of course, in the Gospels that Satan has a role in Jesus' betrayal and his crucifixion. And you do see the defeat of Satan at the resurrection.
And the defeat of death. And it's...
And the defeat of death, okay.
And what's interesting, because by the time you come into chapter 4, chapter 5 of Genesis, you're already talking about he lived 900 years and he died. And you're thinking, you connect death in context seems to be focused on physical death.
Yeah.
But when you come to the New Testament, you really realize the point you made. He died, and the day that he ate of it, and so the death that is being overturned is the death that occurred in the garden, spiritual death.
Yeah.
That separation.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know
So
how much you want to
so
go.
that's a major Bible theme. It's the death that here's where it begins.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that would have impacted Adam and Eve, because if they've just had that curse and that promise, how old were Cain and Abel by the time they had, well, first just Cain. They're probably thinking offspring. There
Yeah,
it is.
Here's the guy.
Promise.
Yeah.
Well, he grows up and he kind of seems like Adam. So, hey, here's Abel. He seems like a better guy, but now he's dead. Did we ruin the promise? I mean, are we lost forever? And so even though death ends up being a meta-narrative theme, they experienced it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Every single day was another day of separation from God and a promise is getting more and more distant from us. And so I think in that, you end up seeing a despair.
Yeah, I think so. The interesting thing is that this gives us a little bit more reason to read genealogies, because it's a focus upon when is the promised deliverer going to come. So it's not just a historical, this is who we know, this person had this person, and so on and so forth. It's coming, like Ingrid pointed out, they're looking forward to a hero of sorts. Okay, so the fall. Of course, that ruins everything. The promise, the man's curse, the woman's curse is pain in childbearing and pain shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, he shall rule over you. We won't get into that too much, but there's a lot of the gender debate and gender roles in marriage. In the church, they would look at these accounts, especially Genesis. Even Paul alludes to it several times. The order of creation, very important in terms of those things, especially, but also in understanding what shifted in their relationship. Okay, so Adam, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and you've eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you, in pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Okay, so what is the curse here?
So he's been called, first of all, to be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply,
now
to work and keep.
Now it says the ground is just going to yield for you thorns and thistles.
Yeah. So how fruitful is he going to be?
Very little.
It's going to be tough.
He's going
He's
to
got
work to eat.
knapweed everywhere.
Before there was plentiful food.
Yeah.
Now he's going to work for it.
Yeah. Which we would say, work is a good thing. Is it the striving after the work that is the bad thing? Is it the unfruitfulness of our labors the bad thing? Or?
That his works are unfruitful.
Okay.
It's like mud raking in a needle storm.
His work is good, and he was given work from the beginning. It was good work and satisfying work and things that they would find joy in doing. But now it's like, okay, you're going to have to work to survive. Yeah. It's not necessarily
You're going to plant your crop and it's going to grow, and you're going to weed it, and it's going to grow again. And you're gonna,
it's a futility.
Yeah.
And
It's a good picture.
being in the ag industry, we've spent century upon century trying to overcome the futility, when the problem never was the weeds, the problem never was the fact that it's futile work. It's a spiritual problem, but we're still trying to work to overcome the symptom of this spiritual problem. And we're doing pretty stinking good. But what ends up happening is those simple little weeds will kick your tail every single time. Whether they're adapting to what you're spraying, or they're crossing fence lines, or they're blowing in on the wind, we will always fight those thorns and thistles.
That was my point with the pine needles. We live on Pine Needle Avenue, and Mark is forever raking, and
Yeah.
it's like it's so depressing at times. You just, you know. But I think it's a deeper picture of our struggle against sin too. You know, just like we talked about, it's not just physical death that happened. The greater death was spiritual death, and I think the greater futility is that spiritual fruitfulness we're not capable of either. We will forever fall short, and unless we could, you know,
As you
until
abide in the
Christ.
vine.
The author of Hebrews actually uses the very same illustration where it talks about the ground bearing thorns and thistles. He goes on to say it is worthless and near to being cursed.
Mm.
Very same words.
In reference to,
In Hebrews 6. For the land that has drunk the rain that often falls
Okay.
upon it produces a crop useful to those whose sake it is cultivated receives a blessing from God. But if it bears thorns and thistles, it is worthless and near to being cursed, and ends up being burned.
which he's not just using that as an illustration.
No.
Yeah, because
I don't
he's,
think so.
yeah. Interesting, okay. All right. So it doesn't go well for Adam and Eve, their descendants. There is, it appears to be at least an okay line that comes from them, Seth. And then there's some other good guys in there too. Enoch is in there. He walked with God, and then he was born, whatever that means. And then Lamech, he's the destroyer. He's the violent one. He wants to go and kill people, and he succeeds at that. Of course, there's other warriors in there too. But eventually, you get to the point where the earth, the whole earth, land, whatever it is really messed up. It's just complete chaos. People are sinful. They are totally depraved, and I guess in the description that we say that doesn't mean they're as sinful as they can possibly be. Every thought or intent of their heart is sinful. So God judges them. He saves Noah because Noah found favor in God's eyes. He was a righteous man. Saves Noah, his wife, and 3 boys and their wives in the flood. Okay? After the flood, God makes a covenant with Noah. Now we could look at this because I guess I should have probably put the covenants in bold there on the notes, but this is really how the story is going to be unpacked through these different points. Okay, I'm not sure exactly how Noah fits into it, so let's just read this real quick and talk about it. So Genesis 8, the floods happen, they find land, they get out, and this is God is showing up to them. Okay, Noah built an altar to the Lord. This is 8:20, Genesis 8:20. He built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, El Nino and La Nina, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Okay, so this is God's promise. He's not going to curse the ground again. He's not going to strike down every living creature again, and he's not going, so this pattern that exists on the earth, the seasonal pattern, is going to exist. It's going to keep going on. Okay, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay, going back again to Genesis 1:28. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. So subdue them, have dominion over them. That's why the deer run away from us, and why our kids can chase turkeys, because they're afraid of them for some reason. Okay, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and every moving thing, so this is a twist in the story. We can now eat things that move, not just plants. As I've given you green plants, I give you everything, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man, from his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. Okay, so what's going on with the lifeblood, the man, shedding of blood of man? What do we see there? Is it just people and animals have value, and an eye for an eye, if you take someone's life, then your life should be taken?
I mean, since there is some sense of the sanctity of life.
Yeah.
Even it goes back to Cain. That the blood is crying, the blood of your brother is crying out to me. God says there, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So it is a terrible thing to shed blood.
Blood being representative of the life.
Okay.
So was this not a command before the flood? Was this not an issue before the flood?
I mean, I think we'd all say yes, it was. It was not a command, as at least as it's recorded.
Well, to me, it's in what is it, verse 5? It's all at once making man accountable to his fellow man, giving man a responsibility on how he treats another person.
Yeah, without a doubt. And there's, okay, he's making it clear now, after the flood, he's making it clear that this is how they should be interacting, mankind should be interacting. And whether or not that was just implied before the flood, we'd have to at least say that because they're made in God's image, that there's value. There's no way that Cain should have been able to do that to Abel. And of course, he would have known that it would be wrong. But here he's making it clear. So in a way, he's tasking Noah now with this new creation. That this is the way. These are the things that they should value as they go about being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth. Okay, so then in 8. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you. So no limit there. This is with Noah, his sons, and their offspring. With every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth.
What's interesting, you just brought out again, is the covenant that is not made with every animal that was on the planet, but every animal that was in the ark.
Oh yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
particular, already there's a particularization of the covenant.
Because that was all that was there.
That was always there.
There was nothing else on the earth. Okay. God said this is a sign. Okay, so we have a covenant that God makes. His promise is that he is not going, he makes it with those people, those animals, that he is not going to destroy all flesh by the waters of a flood. And the sign of that covenant is that God would, let's see. Okay, so this is a sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When it is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So God makes this covenant. He has a sign of the covenant as a remembrance to him of the promise that he's made. The rainbow. Okay. Significance of this. Is this ongoing today? All future generations? Everlasting covenant?
I would say absolutely yes.
Okay.
But did God really need it for a remembrance? You put it there for man.
Well, it's, the way it reads is he put it there for himself.
To remind himself, and I don't think God ever forgot.
No, but I think
what
it's...
he's confirming to Noah is the fact that because you see it, you know that I'm remembering.
There you go. Yeah.
Keep it.
I think that's it. Every time you see it, you know that God is seeing it and he's remembering what the promise that he made. Yeah. So the weird thing is you don't really see, you have the time to Noah mentioned throughout the scripture at several points, but you don't really see the covenant mentioned too much. So I'm really unsure of how this fits together with everything else. Is this just a separate covenant that, is there to show us that God is actually the protector?
But if you look in a progressive fashion, I mean, God is not just, it's not this deistic that He set the clock in motion and He's just left it.
Yeah.
He's still working intimately with man. And so it's, when I think of progressive, greater and greater light, and so this is the first of the covenants that we see in all the scriptures.
Yeah.
That after the fall, you see that He's still working. There's still a covenantal relationship that He's entering into. I mean, of His own accord, of His own act.
Yeah. Of his own act, yeah.
Yeah.
This is his willingness to actually make a covenant with with Noah, his descendants, and the beasts of the earth. Yeah, you're right. So
I think
there
it's
for that.
I think it's important to note the covenants come up because of a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely is everything awesome and then we'll make a covenant to fix it. He just stepped away from killing everybody on the earth. This is a reminder to Noah that God is invested and committed to the life of mankind. Now, there's going to be rules, there's going to be expectations, there's going to be future covenants, but I see this as a recreation. He has set things up and he said, I am still, okay, yeah, I just killed everybody. I am still fully committed to man. And so yeah, it could be the beginning of an escalation. We're going to be getting more and more specific. We're going to be getting better and better. Whatever it is, this is where we're coming from. I'm as crazy as it sounds. I'm for you.
Yeah, which wasn't necessarily that clear before the flood.
Right.
So
And we've already talked about the foreshadowing.
yeah,
That Peter talks about the ark being, Christ essentially is our ark.
Mm-hmm.
There's a foreshadowing of the new creation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a foreshadowing. We continue to see these things.
yeah. I guess I'd look for like a more development of the idea, but I guess that is probably not the intention.
In Genesis 8,
Well, no, I mean, tying it back to, okay, how is this covenant with Noah developed? So I see like with Abraham, it seems like it starts there and then moves on. You see that developed, but you don't necessarily see the one with Noah developed, I guess, in that sense. So maybe that's the reason why I don't understand it.
This this is half observation, half question. Noah's covenant seems to be like this broad, like again that 2,000 feet view. Even the sign is for everlasting. I mean, all nations, everywhere on this globe, you can see there's rainbows. And then the next covenant is Abraham. The sign for that is circumcision. That's like very zone in on one people
Yeah.
that are going to be distinguished by circumcision, and it's certainly not out there for everyone to see, and it's not, global. It's not for all times and
Yeah.
for all mankind and their animals, and it just seems like all of a sudden God hones in on His plan, and the Mosaic is very specific too, and very distinct to this Jewish people. But in the Noahic, and this is my question, in the Noahic I almost see the new covenant being again all encompassing, all people and all nations. Is it almost like it starts up here and it zooms in and then it goes back to the Gentiles and everyone?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you see
yeah.
happening. Yeah, so you have Noah, Abraham, Mosaic, Davidic, and then it starts moving out New Covenant.
Is
To
that
all the
correct
nations,
to look at
yeah.
it in that way?
Totally, yeah.
Then if you push a triangle down, it makes a star, David.
The point is that it's not just with David's offspring in the end.
Yeah, so you do see that, and we get really narrow here coming up. Okay, the interesting thing though is that these nations that are there, so after the covenant is made, you have this incident where Noah's sons uncover is it just his youngest son? Uncover his nakedness, Ham. It's just one son?
Yeah,
And then the other two went in and covered him up?
covered him up. One son saw it, went out
Okay.
and told his brothers.
So Ham, the father of Canaan, that's mentioned in 18, Ham was the father of Canaan. And 22, Ham, the father of Canaan. Let's see, where else is it mentioned? Oh, the curse, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, let Canaan be his servant. Let Canaan be his servant. And then of course it describes chapter 10, 6 through, whatever, 20, describes his descendants, the sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Canaan. So you have this idea here that so this guy, Ham, is cursed now. He will forever be known as the guy who not just uncovered his father's nakedness, but was the father of Canaan. Okay, those evil Canaanites in the Promised Land, and I don't know if this is just Moses pointing this out right here, but that gets traced back to this incident. Those enemies of Israel gets traced back here. Okay, so you're going to have descendants, chapter 10, chapter 11 you have Tower of Babel, and then you have Shem. So Shem is blessed, and his descendants are mentioned in the end of chapter 11 there. All the way down to Abram. And that's where the story gets even more interesting. It gets narrow, but the purpose of it is so that it would eventually get back to here. So we have to remember the promise that God gives to Abram is what? That he would be a blessing to
All nations.
all nations. That his offspring would be a blessing to all nations. So even though the story is moving away from the nations to focus in on one person, essentially, because there's not a nation yet. It's just one guy. And even when you get to the end of Genesis, there's, 70 of them. That's not a nation. That's a small group Bible study. Okay, so even though we're focusing on one person and his immediate descendants, and then what would become of that one person, how his progeny, how his offspring grows, the purpose is eventually to get back to the nations. So this is how the story is progressing now. Okay, everybody's there? We're all together? What time did I say we'd be done? 7:30? Yeah.
5 minutes.
Okay, I've said more than I wanted to. Okay, so let's get to Abraham. God calls Abram out. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, this is Genesis 12, your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay, so this is going to get picked up 4 different times. And each time it kind of expands on this original promise. Okay, it doesn't say here anything about covenant, right?
No.
Okay, but you have God acting, calling him out. Let's see. Ur of the Chaldeans, that's like Babylon area, right? Mark? That Chaldeans are Babylonians and
Mm-hmm.
precursors to Babylonians. Okay, so he calls him out of this country. I forget where it says that his dad was a pagan idolater. I don't remember where it says that. It mentions that somewhere. There's some reference to that. Nothing here, somewhere else in the Bible. Okay, calls him out. Go from your country and go to the place that I'm going to show you. Go to the land that I'm going to show you. I'm going to make you great. I'm going to make a nation from you. And you're going to be a blessing to those who would receive you as a blessing. And to those who do not see you as a blessing, they will be cursed. Okay, no mention of a covenant. Jump over to chapter 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. So you have this, the offspring problem. How can Abram become a great nation if he doesn't have any kids? Gosh, that would be pretty difficult. What if he adopts one? He's got Eliezer. Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. So Abram has solved the problem. I know what I'll do. I'll let him be my heir, and you can make of him a great nation. So it's interesting to see how man has tried to solve their problems. Of course, we know what happens with Ishmael. That's taken even a step further. And Abram is there pleading in a way, well, let Ishmael be the blessed one. I forget what chapter that's in. But he's suggesting, he suggests Eliezer, he suggests Ishmael. The God is like, no, that's not the son of the promise. That's not how this is going to happen. It's not going to come through man's might, through their strength, through their toil, but it's going to come through God who gives the promise.
Through the arm of the flesh.
Yeah. Okay, so the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. He brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven, number the stars if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Okay, so this promise of offspring here. So he mentioned the nation. Now it's offspring. It's even more developed. He believed the Lord and he counted it to him as righteousness. Of course, that gets picked up all over the place. Well, what God does now is that he enacts this promise. He goes through this ritual, this rite, whatever you want to call it. I guess a rite would be, is that the right term for it? Or a ritual, I don't know.
Circumcision?
No, this is the cutting the animals in half thing.
Kind of sacral, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Display.
Okay, so the point is that God is going to do this, and I think what I've read, and who knows, I don't even know how accurate it is, the idea is that if you fail to keep your promise, then you are basically committing yourself to become like these animals that are cut open, and you're passing through the middle of them. So he lays open all these animals, what is it, birds and a goat and a cow, turtle dove, ram. He brought him all these, cut them in half, laid each half over against the other, but he did not cut the birds in half. No, he didn't cut the birds in half. Okay. When birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Why is that there? I have no idea. The sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. The Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. Okay, where does that pick up at? Okay, Exodus, so they're in Egypt. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Which is exactly what happens, right? The Egyptians flock to them and say, here, take our gold, take our necklaces, take our jewelry. As for you, you're going to die, and you're going to be buried. But they're going to come back when the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Okay, so there's the promise. The sun goes down, it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I will give this land. From the river of Egypt, the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of a bunch of other people. Okay, so this is the covenant now. God is acting. He is saying that if he fails to keep his promise to Abram, to make of him a great nation, and to make his offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky, that what happened to these animals when they were split open is going to happen to him. So this is not a conditional covenant. This is an unconditional covenant. So it has nothing to do with what Abram's going to do. Nothing to do with his behavior, nothing to do with how he's going to act, nothing at all. This is God making a promise, and God is the one who's going to keep it. So, conditional, unconditional. Noah was a what? A conditional or unconditional covenant?
Unconditional.
Unconditional. Okay, some people use the word unilateral. He's acting, one person is acting on behalf of another person. Unconditional, without a doubt. The weird thing about the Abrahamic covenant is that you see elements of condition to it. So we'll look at maybe a few of those, but we're not going to get into it too much. Okay, so that's the promise. Again, it gets picked up in 17. This is when it's given its sign. So the sign of the Abrahamic covenant, as Ingrid mentioned, is circumcision. Let's see, how does it develop? Okay, Abram was 99 years old, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between you and me and you, and may multiply you greatly. So it seems like there's an element of condition to that. Walk before me, be blameless, so that I might make my covenant between you. Abram fell on his face. God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful. Notice who's doing that. God is. And I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. So here's this element of kingship, already introduced in Genesis 17. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. So this is a development of this idea of covenant here. I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God.
At one point, back up in 17 verses 1 and 2. The ESV adds, I mean, what you just read in the ESV is not there in the New American Standard or the New King James.
What?
Yeah. Well, it says walk before me and be blameless. The ESV goes on and says that I may establish my covenant between me and you.
Yeah.
It does sound like there's a connection there, but the NAS and New King James, neither one of those include that. They just go, I will walk before me and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you.
I have New King James, it says and, there's going to be.
And I will make, and New King
Oh,
James,
okay.
and I
So
will make my
the
covenant
that I may is
that is not there. At
interesting.
least in those, I don't have the Hebrew.
Yeah, I don't have it either on the NIV.
Yeah.
Okay, I should blot that out.
So that makes it less.
So yeah, less conditional, at least here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So what is added to it? We see the idea of kingship. The covenant is mentioned. He's mentioning the covenant as being made not just with Abram, but with his offspring. So this idea of the continuation of the covenant, because it's going to last forever, everlasting covenant. He gets specific about the land. Land of Canaan is going to be yours, even though you're just going to be a sojourner in it. Okay. As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. And he tells them how to do it and stuff like that. Okay, so the sign then of the Abrahamic covenant is circumcision. What's the purpose of the sign of a covenant?
To remind them.
Does it change? Is it the same for every covenant and sign?
It's like a seal. The assurance of the truth of it all.
Does it distinguish between those who are a part of the covenant or not?
Yes, circumcision certainly.
Okay. Your thoughts?
If we're going to consider this cutting right to be equivalent with the splitting the cows in half, the threat kind of disappears because it's already happened. It's not like you can say, if I back out of this covenant, may I be cut in half like this cow. This sign is, well, the cut's already happened. Now, is it a promise that if I back out of the covenant, may I be cut off from the people?
Yeah. Verse 14.
Okay. So it does seem like there is some threat there, the way there was threat before, and it would by definition be only those who were part of, who had identified with the covenant by the sign of circumcision.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it is different than a rainbow, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you have to really distinguish yourself as one of the covenant, including a very painful procedure. And that's different than looking up in the sky and seeing what God's done up there as a reminder.
Yeah. And of course, the circumcision foreshadows circumcision of the hearts. So you see that trajectory already. You know, it's not just a circumcision made in hands, made in the flesh by human hands. So huge concept that becomes very important in the New Testament. Because this is what you see the Judaizers relying on. Okay.
Even their physical relationship with Abraham. We have Abraham as our father.
Yeah. Because I mean, probably not just a lineage thing, it probably was a circumcision thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't just trace their family back to Abraham, but
Yeah.
they're following his footsteps and circumcised. All right. It does get developed a little bit more in 22, so that's Abraham and Isaac. So the angel of the Lord stops and calls, and this is 22:15. Called Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Okay, so let's see, what do I have next? Okay, if you're curious, Genesis 26, 1 through 5, and 28, 10 through 17 is where these promises get passed on to Isaac. And then Genesis 35, 9 through 15 is where they get passed on to Jacob. There's no way we're going to have time to go look at those. But the idea is that God is continuing His promise. It's passed on from generation to generation. It goes through Isaac, not through Ishmael, even though Ishmael is blessed. 12 tribes come from him.
He's even circumcised.
He's even circumcised. The covenant is not made with him. The covenant is made with Isaac. So the blessing there and the covenant are a very important distinction to make. Covenant is made. Yes, he blesses Ishmael, but he does not make a covenant with Ishmael. Makes a covenant with Isaac. So if you're talking to Muslims, talk to them about that. Okay, so that you get to the end of Genesis, and Jacob, renamed Israel, has come down to Egypt to be with Joseph. They're there, there's 70 of them, and now is that time of enslavement. So Joseph dies, another Pharaoh rises up, doesn't know the people, and forces them into labor. Okay, and you see, important thing I just want to show you real quick. All this is Exodus 1, 5. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt, then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. So you see all those things tying back to Genesis, tying back to Noah. Fruitful, multiplied, the land was filled with them.
But they were not in the promised land.
But they weren't in the promised land.
In slavery.
Yeah, in slavery. Okay, Pharaoh gets, we don't all know the story. Okay, jump to 2:23. During those many days, the king of Egypt died. The people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. So they want deliverance. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Okay, so the reason why God acts now is because of what He promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember I forget which chapter it was it 15? Where He mentions that they're going to be enslaved for 400 years until the iniquity of the Amorites is complete. And then He's going to bring them up. He's going to deliver them. So this is the time now for this deliverance. So He has to raise up a deliverer, Moses, and Moses goes down and gets them. But are they a nation yet?
Not a covenant nation.
Not a covenant nation. Okay. So Mosaic covenant. They're rescued. They go through the Red Sea. They're redeemed. They're brought out of slavery. And they're brought to the mountain. God descends to the mountain, and it gets dark, and there's lightning, and everyone's afraid. Moses warns them not to touch the mountain. But now, we're going to establish the relationship. This relationship is going to have boundaries. Because God has a purpose for these people that He's redeemed. The purpose is this. Exodus 19, 5 and 6. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. Okay, so God's purpose for them is that they would be His treasured possession. They would be a kingdom of priests. That they would be a holy nation, set apart for Him. Okay, Mark, you mentioned this a lot in the sermon on Sunday. Okay, let me look at the verses I want to go over real quick. But what is that? Is there a condition in this? Okay. And the condition is what?
Obedience. It's conditioned upon their obedience.
Okay, conditioned upon their obedience. Okay, so let's look at 23. Maybe it's not 23. Okay, so God gives the Ten Commandments, a bunch of other commandments and laws, regulations, those types of things. Promises to bring them into the land. End of 23. 24 is when they're saying, yep, we're going to do it. Describes the ark, the tabernacle, the priests, and equips some guys to get busy and they start working and building stuff. Okay, Sabbath, end of 31. We'll go here first before we actually look at what the covenant is. So 31:12, the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. Okay, so we have this idea of Sabbaths. Keeping the Sabbath. Verse 16, the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. It's a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So again, echoing back to Genesis 1. Okay, so the sign of the covenant is the Sabbaths. Sign of Noah's covenant, rainbow. Sign of Abrahamic covenant, circumcision. Sign of Mosaic covenant, Sabbath. Okay? The covenant is actually described as the Ten Commandments. So we're going to look at this, 34. He gets the okay, there's the whole incident of the golden calf. So the people say, yeah, we're going to do it. And then Moses is gone for a little bit, and then they start worshiping a golden calf, saying the golden calf is what redeemed us from Egypt. So there's a need to actually start over. Like, whoops, we got off on the wrong foot. Let's have another covenant renewal ceremony. So Moses gets some new tablets, covenant's renewed. Okay, we're going to do it. And so this is 34:27. The Lord said to Moses, write these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with all Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the Ten Commandments. So we have all of those commandments, but we really have 10 commandments. We have these two tablets that describe the 10 commandments that God gives. That is the covenant. The tablets, of course, significant because they're placed in the ark. A copy of Moses' law is placed next to the ark. But you see this picked up in Paul's writings, where you have this comparison between the new covenant and the old covenant. So I don't know if we're going to get there. I really hope we can get there. No, we're not going to get there. I'm sorry. Okay, so anyways, keep that in mind. When we do look, if you want to read it for yourself, 2 Corinthians 3 is going to describe and compare the fading glory of the old covenant, written on tablets of stone, and the exceeding glory of the new covenant. 2 Corinthians 3 and on from there. Okay. What becomes significant with these rules is that because it's conditional, because God He's wanting the people to be something, and their obedience is going to determine whether or not they become that. Okay, so his purpose is for them to be kingdom of priests, holy nation, completely set apart for him, a light to the nations, and that doesn't happen. But what we do see, and this is important because this is what is the whole rest of the Old Testament is based off of, is that there's promises for blessing, there's blessings for obedience, and there's curses for disobedience. So I want to just point these out to you. We don't have to read through them now, but they're probably the most significant chapters when you're reading other parts of the Bible, because that's what other parts of the Bible are based off of. You read Kings, you read the prophets, they're all approaching their ministry and describing those details based off of these blessings and curses. Okay, so this is going to be Leviticus 26. And it's incredible if you actually would read through these descriptions and then go back and read through 1st and 2nd Kings and the prophets. Yeah.
So why do you think God went from unconditional to conditional? Is he,
Okay, good question.
is he already, gearing us up to realizing that we can't do it? Or for those poor people, this whole blessings, cursings would be a pretty rough thing without the Holy Spirit, frankly, to forever try. And it's a little bit like that Greek Sisyphus guy that rolls the rock to the top and it always falls back down,
Yeah.
These are the questions that Paul answers, for instance, in Galatians 3. Why the law then? It was given
Yeah. Okay.
to increase the transgression.
It's not a sign.
I think that's, yeah.
The
Ultimately, that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
But the question is, how does Moses relate to Abraham? So are they separate covenants?
Did God change? Obviously not, but why conditions all of a sudden?
Yeah, and why does Paul say circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing? If it ties us back to Abraham.
If it ties it, I had to process that question before I could answer. Okay, so how are we going to describe this relationship? Is Moses a continuation of Abraham in terms of the covenant?
It sure seems like it. It's for the same people.
In terms of the seed,
Promised land.
In terms of the seed, because it's Abraham's descendants that he makes the Mosaic covenant with.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we're looking at, these are the sons of Joseph.
Okay?
And the land does play a role.
Tony, you said the land,
Yeah,
The promised land.
which he didn't have.
right.
He had the promise of it. He was a sojourner there. He never actually entered into that land.
Moses only saw it
Moses only saw it.
from afar.
Okay, so I still don't know. I think we're still getting narrow here. Definitely, but okay, that's part of it. What else is going on? Is there a difference between Abraham and Moses?
We've made a change from a hint at it being conditional to flat out conditional. So I don't know how much of a role Abraham played in his covenant, but Moses and on, it appears to be, it is 100% on them.
Yeah, it's
It
almost
is.
like James, with show me your faith by my works. It almost feels like with Romans it was credited to him as he believed and it was credited to him as righteousness, right? And then with Moses, so that's your faith. And then with Moses it goes all do this or you
Or
lie.
else? Yeah.
So you-
Is the covenant based on them, or is just the blessings based on their obedience? I mean, is the covenant unconditional and just the blessings and curse, the discipline action based on their obedience, or is the covenant actually relying on them? their
That's-
actions.
That's another big question.
The Mosaic covenant is not a unilateral covenant.
It's
As-
not, but I think because what you see happening is you have the people failing repeatedly, but you still have God saying, I'm going to be faithful to
Right,
my covenant.
right.
So there's elements of unilateralness to it. Now one of the questions is, does he act even when his people are faithful because of the covenant he made with Moses and the people made with him at Sinai, or does he act because of the covenant he made with Abraham? So what's leading him to act in that way, to respond to them in faithfulness?
It's Abraham, he says so. in his-
Several times he does say
Yeah.
it's Abraham.
Yeah.
So
Does he ever say because of the covenant I made with Moses?
I don't think so.
Like, does that comment ever exist?
No.
Because Jesus in the New Testament tends to use that as a strike against the Pharisees and the Jews. Like, you guys are holding on to Moses, but Moses is the one that's going to condemn you. So the Pharisees are attempting to use Moses, but the New Testament writers don't even allow that. You know, Peter in that sermon early in Acts, you don't get to call on Moses. So it seems like it's always referring, his continued faithfulness is referring back to the Abrahamic covenant, not the Mosaic covenant.
yeah. One of the high points, I think this would be, it's the signpost of fulfillment number 2. There's probably more. This is in 1 Kings. Solomon, let's see, 1 Kings 56. Blessed be the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised. Not one word has failed of all his good promise, which he spoke by Moses his servant. So, you have the promise of rest. Where does that show up?
In the sign of Mosaic.
Yeah, the Mosaic covenant's sign.
Okay. So you have it there. You have the mention of Moses, all that he wrote. What does it say? All that he wrote to Moses, which he spoke by Moses his servant. Now that could be the Pentateuch, or it could be the Mosaic covenant. I'm not sure. I have to look at it more. Okay,
Where was that found at?
that's 1 Kings 8:56.
And some of it, you can see in Joshua too. I mean, you see, basically, God says, I've fulfilled my part.
Yes.
I've given you what I said I would provide.
Yeah, so that's signpost number 1. Joshua, let's see that right now. Yeah, 21.
What do you mean by signpost?
No.
Well, so if you're reading through the story, you have these markers that show that God is still acting, and the way that he's acting is through these covenants. So in terms of like how the story is unfolding and progressing, what happens is significant, not because it just happens in his history, but because stuff that he was promised a long time ago is happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's being, so a partial fulfillment, I guess you would say. Even though at the time it's not conceived of as that. So keep that in mind too. When these things happen, this could have been the whole, oh my gosh, this is the promised son type of thing. So they could be saying, okay, when Joshua gets everybody, even though Moses knew that people were going to mess up, they get into the land. The Lord God gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers. They took possession of it. They settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. So you see, like, well, that would be end of story right there. This is the fulfillment. This is what's happening. Like the question again, I think the question is like, how does it all relate to each other, and how do we understand that relationship? So
Says, he provided the land, he provided the rest. You know,
He provided kings.
he provided kings, he enabled them to conquer their enemies.
Yeah, and that's the rest. The rest is that there's nobody who was going to come and raid us and siege warfare against us in our cities and all that type of stuff.
One,
Where did you just read? Sorry, Mom.
21:45.
Yeah,
What, Joshua?
Joshua 21, 43 to 45, and then it's repeated again 23, 14 to 16.
one thing that's happened there is, we had that hourglass. That statement is made when we are very finely focused, and it's missed the broad statement of a blessing to the nations. In fact, the relationship of Israel to the nations is we just killed everybody.
Yeah.
And so we have a signpost of fulfillment, but and if all we're looking at is Israel, it seems like we're good to go, but we have to go back to bigger picture, back to Abraham, back to the discussion with Eve. The nations are somehow going to be involved here. Not just as the slain on the ground as Israel steps over their bodies into the promised land. They're supposed to be a blessing for the nations. So I like that it's a signpost, but it's definitely not the final
It's
statement.
incomplete. Yeah.
Just like the rest is not the final rest. There's a greater
Yeah.
rest to be achieved.
Yeah.
And that is our resting from our works.
Yeah.
And a greater judgment. You
Yeah.
mentioned- You mentioned, I'll read it, Joshua 23. It shall come about that just as all the good words which the Lord your God spoke to you have come upon you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the threats until he has destroyed you from off this good land which the Lord your God has given you.
Yeah. Yikes. So, there's a. Yeah, that's 8 o'clock. We need to stop. Gosh.
Can you just look at the second part?
Well, that was the one in Kings. So
Oh, okay.
it's the story. You know how it unfolds and the cycles of success and failure, success and failure. You get the first Kings, and everything looks really, really good because Solomon's there. You have the Davidic covenant, which we haven't even looked at yet. You have the seed of David on the throne. He's really wise. Nations are even interested. Sheba comes looking and says, "Man, I like what you got. I like your wisdom. I'll give you some kids or whatever. I'll give you some." He makes those treaties with the other nations. She didn't say that. Sorry. You have him naming animals, not naming animals, but speaking, for long periods of time about animals. So you get to there and you think, man, that has to be the fulfillment. He even mentions it. Nothing that Moses said has failed to come to pass. That's the greatest time ever. If you don't think that's the fulfillment, then I don't know what they're thinking. But the cycle again repeats itself. And from there it goes downhill and it even gets worse. So the way that the story is told is that these things happen. There's partial fulfillments that people may think at that time it's the real fulfillment. But then they're left either in their own sin or they're left without seeing the fulfillment of those things. And it doesn't come to pass. So that's the atmosphere into which Jesus walks. And then all of these things, so Abraham and David,
The kings. Yeah.
all of that, those things shift dramatically when you get to Jesus. And he's going to take them all, he's going to flip them on their head. He said this is what those things were pointing towards. Okay, so we're way out of time. We didn't get through Exodus, so I'm not sure. I think we'll probably move on maybe next week. I have no idea. What do you guys want to do? Do we want to keep going this route? Do we want
I say to be continued. I do too.
to be
I
continued?
really like where this is going.
Okay. Okay, well good, then I don't have to type any notes. Save your notes for next week. We'll pick it up Yeah. Somewhere in there.
And then, and just start tying all these things in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Where the great light is revealed. And begin to see.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Because I want to kind of create that tension where you have fulfillments, you have things happening, but you don't yet see
Yeah.
see the true reality of it, and then all of a sudden the doors get blown open and there's Jesus, and it's like, okay, the story
When
makes
he
sense.
arrives
now.
on the scene and says that the time
The
is
time is
fulfilled,
fulfilled.
the kingdom of God is at hand.
Yeah.
That would be so cool after
Yeah.
all that.
So, and I think moving from Moses, because another question would be, how does David relate to Abraham and Moses?
Yeah.
Moving from Moses to new is easier, much easier, because it's simply a contrast. You know, this is a shadow, and then new is the actually fulfillment of that. So we'll get into that stuff next week.